Fred, your design instructions for Medea felt like a bunch of helpful suggestions rather than the more precise parameters you laid down for Murasaki. Which approach were you happier with personally?
I think I was happier with the Medea approach, the sort of things that Pohl Anderson, who wrote half and I wrote the other half of the Murasaki specifications. We got kind of self-indulgent. It was fun to make up kinds of creatures that might live on these two planets, and physical surroundings and their social customs and family relationships and all that. But I think that in doing that, we made it a little tough for the people who are going to write the stories, because part of the fun of writing a science fiction story is deciding those things for yourself, finding interesting areas to write about. And we pretty well straitjacketed them.
David, how did you get involved with the Murasaki project?
Well, I suppose I was known as somebody who was a sucker for a good cause. The book was a fundraiser, and the idea was to get only Nebula Award winners to contribute stories in a series about a world which Fred Pohl and Pohl Anderson developed for this fundraiser. I don't know. I think also I have a reputation for writing hard science fiction at times, and this is about another world.
Aside from inspiring Murasaki, what did you think was the importance of Medea?
Well, it's the sort of experiment we love playing. Einstein called it a Gedanken experiment, thought experiment, what if? And the Medea experiment was where a few people tried to get together and create a plausible planet and then see what would happen next, and let the planet sort of be a co-author in the tale. I don't know. Science fiction authors are a little bit mad. We like experimenting with different approaches to handling things, and this is, one would say, at the far hard SF end, this kind of tour de force.
Does Murasaki do enough that's interesting and new to justify yet another shared world?
Well, I can't judge it because I am inside it. I thought it was an interesting, different experiment because it was done certainly as a charitable operation, for us to donate our time largely and the bulk of the money to go to the SFWA and so on. But I don't see anything intrinsically wrong in shared worlds, you see. Or in books written by numbers of people. My God, the Bible was written by a lot of people, and the stories don't agree. I mean, of course, it didn't have an overall author, I guess, or editor. What strikes me as odd is that people seem to think that inherently shared worlds are contrary to the classical romantic view of the artist. But that's just a cliche. I mean, that's just a class bias, for one thing. Nobody says of, say, rock music that it should be only individual artists, or that that popular culture generally should only be carried out by lonely artists in garrets. We're just used to collaboration in some areas, films, music, but not in others, novels, paintings. But that's just a temporal bias. I mean, general rules like this are simply nonsense. But Murasaki itself, I think it was decently executed. I think its failures are those that the editor exerted very little control, and I got really no editing back. And I was operating in a vacuum. I had seen a few stories beforehand, but I had no idea what people would do afterward, and never did see until the book came out. And so I think the failures of the book, such as they are, may come from too light a hand at editing. On the other hand, I've read a bulk of the book, everything that came before me, and I thought it was reasonably good stuff.
Kate Wilhelm was the only female author included in Medea. Why were you the only female author in Murasaki?
The Chujo Genji books were limited to Nebula winners. And what Bob Silverberg did was draw up an initial list of Nebula winners that he thought might be interested. And there were some other women on it. And some of them had actually made a commitment that they would write a story for it. And then when it came their time, because of the round-robin arrangement, they were just unable to do it. Connie Willis was in the middle of a major novel, as well as several difficult life things, and she just couldn't do it. Pat Murphy, for the same reason. So I wasn't the only woman included by design. It just somehow shook out that way. And I was very pleased to be included because I don't write hard science very often. And this was a chance to work with some of the best hard science guys in the business. And it's fun to be in there with the hard science boys.
Your story, Birthing Pool, really focuses on the Irdizu. How difficult was it working with somebody else's aliens?
I expected that it would be very difficult. But actually, I haven't written that many aliens of my own. And for the reason that I find it sort of intimidating. And it turned out that just the opposite was true. Although I expected it to be difficult, it was actually pretty easy. Partly because Fred had done such a good job designing the aliens. That made a big difference. And partly because I had so much to work on, to draw on, because mine was the last story. And the way that Bob Silverberg had set it up was that I had all of the other stories to read before I wrote mine. Unlike many anthologies, and I think this may have been true of Medea, where people worked independently, here they were composed, if not in order, the chronological order, at least after the first one was written, then the next writer had that to look at, and the next writer had both of them to look at, and it went on a round robin. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot more to pull through. And the third reason that I found the aliens not as intimidating is that my viewpoint character is a child. And the aliens themselves have some childlike characteristics. And it was easier for me to give a child's viewpoint of these other aliens because she accepts them. Children accept whatever they grow up with. And to Rilla, these aren't aliens. These are just other kinds of people that she has known her whole life. So getting into that child's viewpoint with that acceptance removes a lot of the difficulties of writing from an adult viewpoint where the adult is constantly thinking, this is the other, this is different than me, or this is the way we're the same, this is the way we're the different. That kind of constant analysis that goes on in the intelligent adult's mind is largely absent in a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old. And that made it much easier.
So Bob, in the final analysis, does Murasaki live up to Medea?
No, I wish it equaled or eclipsed Medea. It just wasn't big enough. Medea is an enormously large book. In this modern, tawdry, impoverished age, it's very hard to do books of that size. And I wish I'd had another year and a clearer path myself, and that we'd managed something vast and epic, or more volumes, none of this will happen now. I think Murasaki is a fine book, and I make no apologies for it, but I think Medea was a great book, and there's a difference.
And it's out of print.
It's out of print for reasons that have nothing to do with its greatness. They're just endless contractual tangles between Harlan Ellison, who, bless him, is not an easy man to deal with, and his publishers. And it has deprived us all of the book.
Murasaki is in print, and it's a good book for a good cause. Medea is in publishing purgatory. So scour used bookstores, graze the garage sales, lean on the librarian, but find a copy and read it. As Harlan hoped, Medea demonstrates and celebrates the creative journey. The concept seminar was a raucous ride, fueled by surges of imagination with great leaps over burned bridges, detours into frustrating dead ends, and barely a glance at the roadside wreckage of abandoned ideas. A journey of 1,000 pages begins with a single question: what if? And no one asks more what ifs in speculative fiction. Next week on Second Nature, thanks to a ban on whaling, the great blue whales are making a dramatic comeback. And soon these noble creatures will roam the oceans in sufficient numbers that we can start killing them again.